when I came up with the idea and concept for this show to be called Fafsa, it's a play on the words because everybody, if you went to college, maybe you are not familiar with the free application for federal student aid. And so I wanted to make fundamental art for fixing society's ailments. And what I mean by that was, I feel like the educational system in this country is segregated by finances or demographics. It seems like what people need to know is out of reach for a lot of the people that really need to know it. And so when I decided to put this show together, this was the piece that would be the centerpiece of the show and really contain all the elements that I plan on painting and really bringing to the forefront in the future as I do the next semester. This piece is called The Pandemic of Systemic Marionettes. And it's a mouthful, but every word in that title is very important because it is a pandemic. And we have become marionettes, and we are the victim of the system. And so the painting starts in the lower right and left-hand corners with the Doric columns. And I want everybody to pay attention to the architecture because I went to a great deal of stress to make Corinthian columns, Ionic columns, and Doric columns. And why that's important, a Doric column is really, the form is based for the function, in that it's not ornate, it's not decorated, it's a structure to hold up weight. And then as society advances, you get to more skilled artisans who have more time for things like decoration, so you get the Ionic column. And then when society is at its highest period of excess, you have the ability to create all these different flutes and fancy decorations into a Corinthian column. But if you study the great rises and falls of empires, it's in that great state of excess where the empire inevitably is on the way down because people have forgotten about the important things and we exist in the excess. So the Doric columns, the base, which is the start, deals with media manipulation of information and the idea that the history that we're taught is false in the first place. So the history book here, Africa's erased, and on the eraser it says colonialism. The red, white, and blue coming out of the bookmark is not a specific national flag of any country. But let me just say that'll be covered in the next semesters. I'll get into the idea of what that red, white, and blue means and how far it goes back. On the right side, you had the 4 microphones, and they symbolize the 4 major news networks in America. You have the I for CBS, the Fox for the Sly Fox, the Stars and Stripes for American Broadcasting System, and the Peacock Feather for NBC. And so the idea is, whether it be modern day times, how we all know that you get a different story if you watch Fox than if you watch another one, and everybody's agenda is very easy to see if you look hard enough. But you can take this all the way back to the Rothschilds and how they manipulated the information in Europe when modern times were first coming. And the idea is that if you teach a false history and you basically pervert the information that you're giving to the masses, then already from jump at the Doric level, you have some great inconsistencies that need to be corrected. The next level is the Ionic columns. The left side is the badge and the handcuffs for law, the idea of structure in society. Then you have the financial column with the benefit card, the Black American Express, and a wad of money, similar to like a hustler on the street. Now, I'm from Baltimore. My father's a 32-year police retired sergeant, and my brother's a lieutenant who was in riot gear during the riots in Baltimore for the Freddie Gray a few weeks back. So this piece is very personal to me on many different levels. And so this column specifically with the badge and the handcuffs, you know, part of my language, but I hate when people say fuck the cops, because you're saying fuck my pops. You know what I mean? And so my brush is a product of the Baltimore City Police Department. You know, his work through the city and what he was, you know, to give me, through my education, allowed me to produce the image that we're talking about. And so it was important for me to get to the bigger issues that are happening that make people fight and just focus on the color of the skin. Because as these events happen, I would see my social media feeds fill up with so much of they and them and hate and racism. And if any of you follow me, I write a lot, we and us is always more powerful than they and them. So this piece was about showing the ancillary things that happen in our society, these strings that get pulled that allow this fight to take place. So at the Ionic level, this could again be for modern day law, or the idea of even back in history with Hammurabi's code, and the idea that structure, again, the first time structure was given to society, and man lived under law and what that means to protect and serve. This side, again with the finances, shows the different levels of what people are capable of. You can't work in your life to get a Black American Express card. Maybe there's an exception to somebody who becomes very successful, but this is a born condition. And nobody works to get a benefit card, that's also a born condition. The only person that can work in this whole column is the guy who works for himself and gets the money, regardless of how that's obtained. So the third level is the Corinthian level, and that's what I tried to depict, the institutionalized segregation. The only way out of some situations for people is sports and entertainment. And then the idea that your demographics are so important in the life we live. So this is a pin, like you would pull up your Apple Maps and drop your pin for your current location. Nobody gets to choose where your pin drops, right? Some people get dropped in Boardwalk, some people get dropped in Baltimore. And so the idea is, just like life, Monopoly, if you can win if you got Boardwalk, you're losing if you got Baltimore. And so the idea here was these 6 columns represent an ascending, through the architecture as well, they're an ascending level of society to the point now when we all watch the NBA playoffs and watch the NFL, and I love the Ravens, Lionel Messi's my dude, but I'm educated enough to understand that sports augment my life, they don't run my life. And so that's used as a way to keep us blinded and not concerned with all these other issues. And then demographics, what easier way to proliferate the hate and the racism than to make sure that America's ghettos are underprivileged, to make sure that even so much as the food that you can get in the inner city, as opposed to where you can get it in the suburbs, these are all institutionalized segregation through demographics. I gotta catch my breath, sorry. If you look behind the hands, Uncle Sam's coat, it turns into a curtain from like a show. The idea that you're in the theater. So every time one of these strings gets pulled, I was describing before how I would look at my social media feeds, and I felt like I was watching the theater take place, and I felt like all my friends were getting their strings pulled and saying some of the worst things that I have ever heard. And I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to paint something that would be a visual story for people to understand. It's bigger than just the color of our skin, and it's bigger than just police brutality. It's bigger than that. It's a system. It's a pandemic, and we got to stop being puppets. So Uncle Sam is at the top. Behind him are these 3 social media applications. And this is a very important aspect, and listen to the words that I'm using. It's a social media application, the same way you download it to your home screen of your phone. When these situations happen, they get downloaded into our everyday life, almost like downloaded onto the psyche of your home screen. And so you're forced to deal with these applications the same way you go to your phone 10 times a day. These applications float over us in society. And these applications are what they use to keep us fighting each other. Now, an interesting aspect of this is if you look at, it's funny, I've done all this research. If somebody can help me with this, it would be great. I don't know what these are called. They're the marionette tools, maybe. I don't know if there's an actual word for it. Marionette is a string puppet, okay? But it's interesting how the composition, it looks like that's a cross. It looks religious. There's a spiritual aspect to it. I don't know if it's unintended or one of those things that happens and it's a beautiful mistake, but how funny is it that we're talking about a system and control and a way of brainwashing people, and it also doubles as an idea of religion. And if anybody needs to go in depth about that, you can turn around, and that piece goes way into more detail than I can right now. So Osiris is the subject matter back here. The holy book in Egypt is the Book of the Dead. Osiris lived in the underground, and he was dead. And so he's portrayed all the time as green in artwork. And I wanted the skin tone of these 2 arms to be the focal point of color here. So I didn't want to make Uncle Sam white, because it's not about white at that point. It's not about color. It's bigger than that. And so I painted in green, this slightly toned green, to make the correlation to what Osiris is, and how deeply this information goes back, and how that figure that's still pulling the strings has all those connections previous to anything that we can deal with in modern day. The crown in the background is the crown jewels of England. So when these great people came to this country to create a new society with freedom and all these things, we really have just spent 200, 300 years being enslaved to the same thing that we tried to get away from. I mentioned before that I'm from Baltimore, so as this piece was being painted, I already had Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, The Chokehold in New York, and Mike Brown, and then Baltimore happened. And so how, as a son from Baltimore, do I not use my voice, my talent, my platform to make a statement about that situation and what it meant to me and my city and my family? So this tattoo on my hand that I paint with is the flag of Baltimore. It was one of my first tattoos, because when I left at 17, I knew that I could leave a city that a lot of people don't have the hope and the talent and the ability to get out. So if you've all been paying attention to the news, and they call the rioters thugs, or they talk about the inner city conditions in Baltimore, I lived through it, and my friends are still a victim to it. And so I was able to go up 95 North and come to New York and be an artist because I was given a gift. But I've never forgotten the people in my city that don't have that. And so I got that inked on me very early, so every time I painted something, I knew where I came from. So if you look here, the flag of Baltimore in black and yellow, because the idea is that's the playing field now for the theater and the show that they're pulling the strings. This is right now. I don't intend to have all the answers, and nor do I propose that, but I'm not going to paint the problem without providing also the solution, or what, in my opinion, humbly, I think the solution could be. So in the foreground, you have the two kids. And the idea is no child is born in this world with hate. When a child comes out in the hospital, he doesn't know what color he is. Doesn't know what color the doctor is. He don't even know what color his parents are, you know? We teach that. And just think about that for a second. We teach that. And so the idea is it's on us, this younger generation, you know, to teach this next generation that comes after us and remove the hate from the lesson. Because the only way to break any of this down is through education, and that's the idea of the symbology with the pencil, and working together. So here, where they're fighting, here they're working together. And the idea is they're taking down the column that deals with finances. And it's funny because I think that's like a metaphor for what I'm trying to do. Because if the free application for federal student aid is based off of financial levels, and they segregate the education and the information that you can get from the universities or the classrooms and etc., then the first place, the first column that needs to be destroyed, eradicated, at least cracked a little bit, is the financial one. And everybody knows the quote, right? You give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, he goes home satisfied. You teach a man to fish, he knows how to feed himself forever. In all those Ivy League classrooms and all these places that is segregated from finances that we can't get to, it's still just a person teaching a person, right? It's still just a human telling a human what they need to know about history and media and money and finances and where you live, the city and sports. So my thing was, why can't we teach each other how to fish? You know? Why do we always continuously fight each other and scrap and try to get the last fish, so somebody always goes to bed hungry, when the truth is all of us could be happy there's enough here for all of us to teach each other how to fish forever. So this piece, I hope to be alive long after I'm gone. I always talk about, if you've ever heard my interviews or what I speak about, I learned art history in school because it taught me about earlier cultures. It taught me about people, music history and art history. If they were to teach music history right now, or art history right now, I would consider all the artists in those mediums as failing. Because what kind of legacy are we putting down? What's our art history lesson in 200 years from now in 2015? What are they going to teach? And so my lane and what I serve to do is try to define this time. I live through this the same way that you guys do. I just have a talent to paint. So whereas words and education and the ability to speak and communicate is sometimes not afforded to everybody, this was my way of using art as a language that's visual we don't need to speak the same dialect. We have the same organs and we see the same, we perceive it the same way. So as I go on with this FAFSA course and go on to the first semester, the second semester, and third semester, my subject matter is going to be defined by the present day situations that we find ourselves in. The sad part is, I had more icons over here for Sean Bell, Amadou Diallo, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. There's going to be more of them. Everybody knows that's the sad part. And so my thing is, we know what's coming. And I'm going to use whatever is being manipulated by the media, whatever history they're teaching the wrong way. I'm going to use my parents' hard-earned time and money that they put into me to get me to the right places and have those abilities to speak this way and to be educated. I'm going to give it back to you in imagery. So hopefully, listen, if it's redundant and you've heard it before, I'm not a professor. I'm not trying to teach you things to make myself seem smart. I'm trying to give you things to make you want to spark some thought, to talk to your fellow man, your neighbor, your loved one. The idea is the power's with the people, man. The power's with us. And if knowledge is power, and it's only people teaching people in the schools, then the math is easy. That's it.